Let's talk reading aloud to our children. This is probably one of the things that I am most passionate about as far as a mother besides discipleship. So hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Megan and I am so glad that you are here. And if you're new, even bigger welcome to you. But today's video is actually part of a collaboration all about how we do read alouds in our families. And the host for this collaboration is Shawna from World of Washabaugh. Make sure you go check out her channel. I love her channel. It's got a really neat dynamic to it. Not only does she have 4 children that she's homeschooling, but what's really cool, what creates such a neat dynamic, is that they are 2 sets of twins, which is pretty stinking awesome. So make sure you head over and you check out Shawna's channel. I will link it down below. And also I will drop a link to the playlist down below so you can check out some of the other great videos in this collab. Now, as I stated at the beginning of the video, reading aloud to my children is honestly probably one of the most passionate subjects in motherhood, like as far as motherhood goes for me personally. I know it's not going to be the same for everybody across the board, but besides discipleship of my children, reading aloud to them is something that I am extremely passionate about. Now, part of that passion came from a lifelong love of reading. So this probably honestly goes all the way back to when I was a baby, pretty much. And I have very vivid memories of my grandma sitting and reading to my sister and I in a chair in her living room. But as time went on, probably the absolute most vivid memory in my mind as far as reading goes is with my stepmom. So my stepmom is an avid reader. She's also a teacher, and she just instilled this absolute love for learning in me. Even when I got to that age where you're kind of like in later elementary school, middle school, where, especially middle school, when it doesn't seem so cool to read anymore, even though it really is cool. But she really was a huge push in me continuing to read. And she just instilled that in me so much. Growing up, when I would be at her and my dad's, we would all curl up together and she would read aloud to us all the way up. I have memories into middle school and even early high school of her reading aloud to us as a family at night. The best part about it was her doing all of the voices of, I think, my favorite book that she ever read to us. And it may have been the very first book, was James and the Giant Peach, and her doing the voices. And every time that I have read that book since, or that I've read it to my own children, I can hear her voice in my head imitate the voice of Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker. So that's how vivid that memory is in my life. And so it's something that I wanted to pass down to my own children. And it's just such a valuable thing. So because reading aloud to my children was such a huge part of my life, of something that I wanted to do, when we had our first son, who is now in 5th grade, he's 10, when he was born, I wanted to carry on that same tradition of reading aloud to my children and really making it be something that they fell in love with as well. So starting, honestly, actually, I have a picture, and I don't know if I'll be able to find it. I'll try to look for it and insert it, but it's actually a picture of my sister, who is a librarian. See the theme here, all the reading in my family. My sister is actually a librarian, and she came to visit Tanner in the hospital when he was born, and she read him his very first book in the hospital. I think it was The Very Quiet Cricket, from Eric Carle. That was kind of the start of this whole journey of instilling a lifelong love for reading in my children, and really laying that groundwork for being good listeners during read aloud time. Now, if you are hearing me say this and you've thought, well, my kids are in 3rd and up, I've already missed that window. You haven't missed the window. And please don't feel, I do want to say this as well. In this video, I'm going to talk about and show you clips of how our family does some of the read alouds. Please, please don't let that influence you in a negative way as far as making you feel the feeling of comparison. This is not perfection. In most of the clips, and honestly, most of the time, my 3-year-old, like tonight, for example, my 3-year-old was not even present for the read aloud. She was in her room playing Barbies. I'm actually okay with that. Over the years, I have learned that your children, when you continue to do something and it becomes a habit in your home, that they do pick it up. I'm not gonna force her to sit and then it make read aloud time just go, you know, for everybody else. Especially when it's a book that's not really age appropriate. So for right now, you know, as like a side note here, right now, my 3-year-old, for example, I don't expect her to listen to the chapter books that I read to my older kids tonight, because those are completely over her head. If she stays in the room and listens to them, that's awesome. But they're really not age appropriate for her as far as vocabulary, so I understand why she checks out and she goes in the other room to play with dolls. I'm fine with that. She gets plenty of read aloud time with mommy throughout the day when we read picture books and things like that that are more on her level. So going back to the beginning of laying that groundwork. So reading picture books and things like that are just as important as reading chapter books in those beginning years. We honestly, I think we did our first read aloud, like chapter book read aloud, when Tanner was around 3 years old. So again, he's my oldest. So at the time, I had Asher as well. So he was 1 at the time. And the first series, it was actually from a series, the first read aloud that I ever did was again given to me and recommended by my stepmother, and it is the Mercy Watson series from Kate DiCamillo. And these are just excellent books, you know, intro to chapter books. They're very repetitive. It talks about the hot buttery toast all the time. If you've read Mercy Watson, you know what I'm talking about. But it is about Mercy, who is a pig who is treated basically like the baby of Mr. and Mrs. Watson. And so you follow all these adventures of Mercy Watson the pig, and the kids really do kind of fall in love with Mercy. So this is the series right here. Now what's cool about this is once you finish the series, Kate has gone on to continue to write stories about Decawoo Drive, which is the road they live on, but also, you know, about some of the other characters and things like that. So this is just a really great series for really young ones. It keeps their attention and it's a very early introduction to read aloud. So this was an awesome thing to start our read alouds with. Another really great one is, of course, Beatrix Potter, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, which is like the tale of Peter Rabbit and stuff like that. So that's really kind of how I started. I think that backstory is really important. The expectation of your child, of really trying to engage your child in your reading. As they have gotten older and the pictures start to disappear out of the chapter books, what I started to do was I would give them each a notebook, and they were trained. I say trained because it really was, it kind of became a habit. It was kind of, you know, it trained them into this habit of every time we have read aloud time, they grab just a little spiral notebook that is their read aloud notebook. So they do it every time that I get our morning basket or our read alouds out. They go and they get a little notebook, something to draw with, and they sit quietly in the floor or on the couch or at the table, and they draw while I read. Now, sometimes if, like for example, we did a lap book on Charlotte's Web, and so I printed out some like coloring pages and things like that from Charlotte's Web for them to color. So sometimes I will do something like that, but normally they are drawing pictures of what's being talked about in the story. So a few things to keep in mind if this is a new habit or new thing that you are forming for your family, okay? Number one, this is not something that comes overnight, okay? Don't sit down with the expectation that, oh, it's going to be daisies and roses and we're going to read all day long. If you haven't instilled that as a habit yet in your children, then it's probably not going to happen that way. Now, it could, but it's probably not if it's something new, and that's okay. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, if it seems like you are getting a lot of pushback, especially from kids that may be a little bit older, if they are giving you a lot of pushback, maybe consider some more books that lean more towards their interest, and go that route. You can do a unit study with it. You can do some interest-led learning that branches off of it. You can even do lap booking off of it. A great example is I went through a phase where I loved all things like adventure and survival type stuff. So The Hatchet and My Side of the Mountain were like my favorite books in middle school. And so during that time, it would have been really, really cool to go on and research and learn about like those real survival tactics. Like, would those things that he did in the book, would those really have been possible? You know, that kind of thing. Or, you know, going on a camping trip in the middle of reading that book. Or maybe you are camping and that's when you start the read alouds, and it would be one of those books on survival or whatever. So there's lots of routes that you can take that can start the appeal toward reading those books. So for us, I really do keep it pretty simple. My little one, I will either let her, you know, go in her room and play with dolls like she did tonight. I'm fine with that. But I would prefer for her to be in the room. So a lot of times she will either sit down with them and draw in a notebook or color like the older kids do, or I will give her a quiet, busy activity to do while we're doing the read aloud. So that's just how we do it. I mean, for us, it's just kind of simple. I like to simplify, but really it is truly something that comes by it becoming a habit. That every day, okay, well, you know, maybe the first day you just read a couple of pages, okay? And then the next day you read 3 pages. And then the next day you read a whole chapter. And then the day after that, maybe you'll even get through 2 chapters. I usually don't go over 2 unless we're like really, 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 really into a book. But, and that's more for like time's sake, personally. But I want to encourage you to read, because it really has become probably my favorite, absolute favorite part of our homeschool. And as I mentioned before, second to discipling my children, it has become a passion in motherhood for me to read aloud to my children. So, and again, I know people have different passions, and I know certain things work for families in different ways. Additional resources I want to mention are Read Aloud Revival. Sarah McKenzie has some excellent resources. She has reading lists for like by subject, by age, by boy versus girl, by all different things, okay? Like themed, seasonal themes. She has all kinds of reading lists, which I will link down below, along with her website. She also has an excellent podcast, but she really has some great resources, and so I highly recommend that, and also some of her books. Another really great resource is when Tanner was, I think, in kindergarten, is when I read it. It is called Honey for a Child's Heart, and it is an excellent book resource for a parent just to give more support in read alouds and why it's important, but also some suggestions on some great read alouds to read. Another great list that I like looking at as far as books by year and age appropriateness for read alouds, but also books that correlate well to whatever you're studying in history or science or whatever. I actually like to look at the Sunlight reading lists. So Sunlight is a curriculum. We currently don't use it, but I do glean a lot of great ideas from their reading lists. Especially this year, we're doing U.S. history, and almost all of the read alouds that we're doing have come from the Sunlight book list for their American history. So that's really a great resource as well if you ever want to like glance for ideas on certain like time periods and things like that for read alouds, and also for age appropriateness, and for good quality books and books that are appropriate as far as content. So that's super important as well. So down below, I will link several videos I have done on read alouds. I did a video on some of our family's favorite, all-time favorite read alouds so far, which we will have some to add to that list this year. I can already tell you that because we're reading some really good ones right now. I will link the video of what our read alouds are this year, and I will also link our morning basket video playlist down below as well. So our morning basket is normally when we do our read alouds, but we have been doing them a lot at night because Noah is he's my youngest, he's a year old, he's in that transition where he's giving up his morning nap, and so that morning time is when we do a lot of those read alouds while he's normally napping. And since he's starting to give that up, we are moving a lot of that read aloud time to the evening when he's already down for bed and it's a little more, you know, chill. All right, so I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. I don't know that I really gave all that much information. I do hope that it is encouraging to you in your endeavor to create a read aloud time and memories with your family. And I just want to encourage you today to try it out, you know, and like I said, we have been doing this since our children basically were born, but it doesn't always look perfect. It never looks perfect. Who am I kidding? There's always a blip every time. And sometimes I get halfway through a chapter or even just a couple of pages in and we go ahead and put it down. And that's okay. Just keep at it is what I want to encourage you with today. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I would love if you would hit that subscribe button, push that like button. Make sure that you check out Shawna's channel, but also check out the link to the playlist down below. Thanks so much, guys, and have a blessed day.